Ryan, you want to record? Cool. So hi everyone, welcome to the month is it May COVES community call. I don't know, it's hard. Um, this month we thought after I took you through that kind of blazing fast tour of the aggregate dashboard last month, we would provide just a little more space for all of you to either explore it if you hadn't had the chance together, if you had had the chance to talk with other museums like yours about what you're seeing or um, you know, what other questions you have. So we'll go into breakout rooms pretty quickly, but before we do that, I wanted to address a problem that several people have come to me with on the aggregate dashboard. And I'm just going to screen share to show you all what I'm talking about. Uh, so this is just the Museum of Science data. I'll just share it just as an example. So you see your Net Promoter Score is showing up fine. You see the Museum of Sciences, but the aggregate looks like it's not appearing. So a few people have found this issue, and luckily it's a real easy fix. It's just something funny the dashboard is doing that I haven't figured out how to override, but it's defaulting to Museum of Science as my institution. So if I just say all instead, everything should show up just fine. So if you've been running into that problem, just click the filter at the top and you shouldn't run into it anymore. It was quite a few people, and I was like a little surprised that the dashboard was being so weird. Yes, Caitlin, you're welcome. And it's funny because it's such a small thing, but if you don't know how to fix it, it's like no fun. All right, so if there's any other problems like that that you've run into, maybe talk about them in the small group or something and bring them. Obviously I don't want people logging into the dashboard and having that kind of issue. So I want to make it as easy to use as possible for all of you. But anyway, we are going to send you all into breakout rooms pretty soon. But first, going to make sure that everyone has the tools they need to log into the dashboard and has a couple of ideas for things to explore. If you didn't do any exploring before this call, that's totally fine. It does not matter. So first, I'm going to send you the login, the link to the login page, in case you don't have it, and put it in the chat here. coves.qualtrics.com/vocalize. If you are someone who does not have an institutional dashboard for whatever reason, then you can use our demo dashboard, which doesn't have a comparison page, but it does have the whole aggregate summary. So username, I'll put it in here. It's info@understandingvisitors.org and password. So feel free to just do that in the background. Go ahead. Of course, you don't have to, but it's nice to be able to look at the dashboard while you're talking about it. And then in the invitation, we had some ideas about like things you could try or things you could look for. Of course, you can look at anything you want, but if you're feeling stuck or if you're feeling like you don't know where to start, you could, for instance, use some of the pre-built filters like museum size or AAM region to compare your data to that subset of the data. You could create a filter based on one or more characteristics of visitors, like members, but also people coming with kids or something like that. Or you could explore both the art and science aggregate dashboards and see what differences you see or what similarities you see. So these are just some ideas. I'm going to put those in the chat so you have access to them in the breakout room. Again, if you're just feeling kind of stuck. And shortly, we'll open up the breakout rooms. We have created, I think, 5 of them, 5 breakout rooms. We have art museums, children's museums, science museums, natural history, and university museums. Now, I know a lot of you might kind of cross and you could go to like more than one room. So we're going to take a few minutes for the rooms to kind of settle. And, obviously you don't want to be by yourself in a room. So if you see that you're alone, you can just try to hop to another one. Or, if you're the only museum of whatever type on this call, feel free to join any room you want. You should be able to just join. But wanted to put these here for you all. So I think with that, does anyone have any questions before we start? Just put them in the chat. If not, we will click the open breakout rooms.
Faces. I was bouncing between rooms, so I'm happy to hear you all sort of sharing back together. So would love for this. We wanted to just give time for the full group to share across institution types about, you know, sort of what was discussed in your room, what are interesting things that you have found in your data dashboard explorations, or what interesting things that other people share. So just open space now. Feel free to come off mute and share thoughts or questions. And if we get quiet, I have more questions to prompt us with.
And I took notes, so I can always chime in.
Amazing. Lauren, did you have one more question for the group? Oh, just minor. Okay.
So maybe just by starting, it'll get people in. But Lauren's chat is a reminder that one of the things that came up for us in using the dashboard was not just about comparisons to aggregate, comparisons to region or size. It was kind of the timing aspect of things. So what were we noticing when we looked at our institutional data in relation to everything that's been going on over the last few years? So specifically for our group of art museums that haven't been collecting as part of COVES for years and years, like what are we noticing recently? And has there been a change over time just in the pattern of net promoter scores or overall experience ratings? And how can we contextualize that either within our group or across, basically, like what's the big picture that we could pay attention to that will help inform our institution? So that was one thing we talked about.
Megan's been volunteered in the chat to talk about something. Anything you want to share?
I have. So I'm really excited about arts museums being involved in COVES now, because I think the connection between science and arts is, always been there. And it's exciting to have the same instrument for, both of those big buckets of groups. And I was really struck by how frequently the word beautiful came up in the open-ended responses to the net promoter score and the overall experience score questions for art museums. And it's just more of a something that I noticed than anything to like fully be commented on, but it really like came. I was like, wow, there's like the word beautiful is coming up a lot in all of these comments. And a little part of, the science museum me was like, we're beautiful too. We can be beautiful. But it was certainly something that piqued my curiosity. And I was wondering if anybody else had, noticed some interesting things between the art and science museums, with the caveat that I don't think that I don't know how long some of the non-science museums have been collecting surveys. So I don't know if there's, enough of a sample size that we can start to draw some valid inferences between the different groups.
I can only speak to children's museums, and obviously for us, the word fun comes up a lot. So there is always a catchword, I think, and I think people kind of go to these museums for a specific experience, and I think art museums, it is for the beauty, and I think children's museums, it's for the fun. So I think it's pretty, pretty much what you're going to get a lot of. But I'm kind of curious now what people are saying from science. You know, are they getting, oh, learned a lot, or learning, or education might be something. I don't know.
Marjorie had mentioned in our breakout room about how science museums are, what was the term? Was they're the vitamin, as opposed to the, you know, inspiration that a science museum, based on a different style of survey that they'd done, which is like, can a vitamin be like a gummy vitamin where it's also like kind of tasty like candy? Can we become a gummy vitamin instead of, you know, a horse pill?
And I think, Megan, that's such an important part of communicating to, especially to our peers within our organizations, that even though the vitamin is absolutely part of the visit, that the fun and the interesting and the exciting, it has to go with it. And we actually see that in the data as well. But it is always, you know, like, it's good for my kids, less soul filling that you see again in those art comments, and that we've sort of looked for in our data, and again always seen, you're fun and cool, and I feel like I spent a really good solid afternoon because my kids learned something and they didn't know they were learning something, which is the gummy vitamin right there. But it doesn't fill your soul the way, like a gummy vitamin does not fill my soul. I do not know what food would do that, but we all probably have our own choice for what food stuff would do that for ourselves.
We sort of tossed out a couple of different questions for the full group to consider, and thinking about where we are in the time of this conversation. I'm wondering about, and maybe you all talked about this in small groups and someone in each group took notes because we didn't make that request at the beginning, but wondering about whether there are additional visualizations that you would like to be able to access within the dashboard, or if the dashboard can't do it, you know, things that we might be able to figure out how to support you with. Are there other things that you'd like to see that is not currently able to be reflected in the dashboard?
Hi, we actually haven't even started our COVES data collection. This is all sort of like preliminary stuff, filling in for somebody else today. But one thing I know that we've tracked in the past that I think, given that we've made some changes and pivots during COVID to be more open-ended, larger spaces to fit people in the museum, is the duration, the amount of time that people are spending in the museum. I've sort of perused the dashboard and I didn't get any sense that that is being collected.
Mm-hmm.
So that is right.
It is, yeah.
The good news
It's not
is
a very interesting answer for why it's not on there right now, which is just that I can't figure out how to calculate the duration in the dashboard, like with the dashboard's tools, with the type of data we have. So it's like, it is being collected, so we can absolutely find that information, and maybe one day I'll solve this problem, but it's like, it's driving me crazy.
in the longer answer, maybe I'll go with the shorter answer first. For those of you who are data savvy, it's in the raw data file. Every month when you access your Dropbox location, you'll have access to that and can analyze it, quantify it, graph it, whatever you want to do, while we work on the dashboard solution. And the longer answer is it's because of a dumb way that Qualtrics records date and time variables. So.
Gotcha, thank you.
And yes, just to chime in on Julie's comment, if you are collecting, if you're collecting data via email still, which most of you are not, that there's a handful, but then that data point would be disabled, because the way we calculate duration is they enter the time, approximate time they entered the museum, and then the exit survey is time stamped, and so that's the duration plus or minus 15 minutes based on their estimate of when they arrived. If they respond via email, it could be a day, a week, a month later, so we don't calculate it for the email method. But that's being phased out mostly.
Can you it's also not for those who take it on site with the QR code on their own device. So, right. It's just if you use the museum tablet.
Yeah, we have set it up just that way. Although, like, open to people's thoughts about whether or not it does make sense for the QR, you know.
In terms of visualization on the dashboard, I don't know if this would be possible in any way, but it'd be kind of neat if the dashboard would automatically flag things where the numbers for your institution were very different from the aggregate for some reason, because that can imagine that could draw people's attention and cause them to think about it. I don't know if that's possible or not. It's fine if it's not, we can just read the numbers.
I don't know, but it's a fun problem to investigate.
Any other things folks would like to see? Whether or not you think we can do it? What would be your dreamiest dashboard?
I really like heat maps. So like, it'd be kind of fun to see like the different footprints of institutions, or kind of how like some of those regional maps and things like that would be kind of cool to see.
One thing I'm always interested in hearing from people is if there's like subcategories of museum that you want to be able to compare yourself to. So like, you know, we have those size and region, you know, we could probably do a more granular museum type, like we have the breakout rooms here, but I'm sure there's lots that like I'm not thinking of, or that I won't know how to categorize exactly. So I always want to hear about those.
The welcoming survey this year did encyclopedic as a category, which I thought was interesting to kind of think about us in that way.
Tom, just wanted to elevate your comment in the chat that, yeah, I feel like when I'm reporting this data internally, I'm most often reporting it in the type of comparison that you're talking about. So, and especially over the last 2 years. So like, where were we 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 12, 18, you know, so that kind of trending data, which I realize is challenging because we start to get a bunch of factors in there. We're like, we're aggregating and we're looking over time and we're trying to like choose moments of comparison. But as I think about translating this to like being able to answer the MPS is huge, you know, to go to my director and say like, here's where our MPS is, here's the aggregate, like huge value added. And then I know the next question she'll ask me is, well, is that the same as before the pandemic or after? Like that piece. I think especially as we think about COVES, like we have so many points of comparison and institutions to compare to. Now that sort of how do we do that moment in time picture, I think becomes more relevant.
And that time comparison is definitely possible and actually easier than it used to be, I think, with the whole live data thing. Qualtrics expects that, and so it has more built-in features to compare over time. So I haven't like fully gotten that set up, but I have a couple ideas for how to do that, and I think it'll be better than it used to be. Thank you for sharing all these ideas in the chat. Great.
Yeah, there's a great suggestion in the chat. I wonder, we'd probably have to ask institutions to define that for us. Urban, rural, suburban, because it's a kind of a perception question. It's not just based on population density, and it could get confusing quickly. But for the sake of the dashboard, if we just asked institutions to opt in based on categories, I think we could do that pretty easily.
Reminds me of something I talked about in our children's museum room, which was short-lived but very fun. Was that I used to have this filter for child-focused museums, and we had said like any museum with adult-only group population of less than 10%. And Rebecca helpfully shared with me that that might exclude the Mayborn, but the Mayborn like does consider themselves to be a children's museum in part. So maybe thinking more about self-identification there than a particular metric would be helpful.
Great suggestion from Beth in the chat, kind of creating your own pages and duplicating visualizations.
I do this a lot. It's going to max me out at some point, probably with the private pages. I don't know if we have a limit. But that's how I export my monthly and quarterly reports. So I started by not an aggregate one, because we weren't doing that at first, but duplicating my dashboard. I also have 2 different institutions, so it's a whole nother level of crazy. And then I would go through, so like I would delete, like we didn't have the gender, all that data, because I didn't want it to print when I would export it. And then I could add in, and when you edit the individual filter, you can add a second filter inside that for date, which is like what we do for special exhibitions. So I have old ones separated out that I can compare. I put together like a quarter report and just did the past the 3 months independently. I mean, you don't want to duplicate forever, but then what I've been doing every month is just exporting the same report. I also made separate reports for comments because it's really annoying to have those attached, and it messes up your formatting real bad depending on how many comments. So I have 2 separate private pages for comments, and then just every month I update the date. With comments, you have to change the size of the boxes. A little annoying, but I used to like export them into an Excel, and it was too much. So for me, it's been really helpful to have those couple of private pages and just reprint. And I start by just duplicating the initial dashboard and then going from there. Trial and error, take a lot.
Thanks so much for that. Yep, similar to Sloan. We're at time. And anything for us to say about next month, or I can't remember offhand. We're ready for next month.
I can't remember
8 a.m.
I was going to say, I think, yeah, there's a national conference coming up. It is in Boston, the American Alliance of Museums. For those of you who will be at present, COVES has a bunch of stuff going on. We will send an email both to this kind of listserv and cross-post on our COVES COP message board. But we're co-opting the CARE happy hour on Thursday afternoon. For those of you who will be there, that's right. We are going to be present in the expo hall, either at the Association of Science Technology Center booth or the neighborhood hubs piece. And then we have a COVES session that Alex and did we already lose?
Alex and Alex.
Alex and
from
Alex.
Mint.
Yep, we have a COVES session Saturday afternoon. So come see COVES, and if you won't be there in person, we can't wait to see you virtually next month at our community of practice call.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.